Welcome to the Jeff Knows Inc. Entrepreneurial Podcast with your host, Jeff Lopes. Jeff has over 2 decades experience as a serial entrepreneur, building brands like Kimura from his home basement to a multi-million-dollar global brand that has sold over 250,000 pairs of boxing gloves. Jeff's here to educate, guide, and drive you on the process of bringing your ideas and dreams to reality with the inspiring stories from some of the top business minds.
Welcome to episode 124 of the Jeff Knows Inc. podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Lopes. Super excited to have on today Greg Darley. Greg is the host of Stewardship podcast, energy coach, great conversation. Sit back, everyone, and enjoy. We are live on the Jeff Knows Inc. podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Lopes. Super excited to have on today Greg Darley. How are you, brother?
Good. How are you?
We met through social media a few months back, and we've been connecting. I was actually on Greg's podcast a couple weeks back. So excited to have him on ours and get to know his journey as an entrepreneur, his journey as a dad. There's so many layers to this today. I always start off by our podcast by kind of getting to know who you are, what you're currently doing, and then we'll just let the conversation go from there. So give the audience a little rundown on what you're up to.
Yeah, thanks. Well, we were just talking earlier. I'm married to Betsy. We're coming on almost 17 years now, which is crazy to think about. It's like, wow, it flies by. We have 3 kids. They're all under the age of 10. And so it's just a very active, crazy full season right now. For work, yeah, I mean, I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years, basically right out of college, had a few different jobs, but there was always, an idea, I'm always peddling in ideas and pursuing things. And so, I started a nonprofit, in my 20s on the side that led to full-time job.
What's put in your head to start the nonprofit?
It started with, when I first became aware of the issue of human trafficking, it just floored me. And I realized, wow, this is just incredible, just terrible darkness and evil. And wow, I wanted to do something about it. And, most people are like, hey, who's helping and how can I help? I'm thinking, of course, I'm just thinking, I need to start something. That's just my default is, hey, let's start something. And so started that and that really, my journey, honestly, when you in the moment, because this was always the sort of tension within a marriage and within relationships. And maybe I think there's probably listeners that will get this is that in the moment, there was a lot of, so what are we working on now? And how is this connected? And for me, there was always, well, this is connected to this. And then, when you zoom out, it's like, oh, there's a clear kind of path and progress and progression that you see in the moment. It just looks like you're flying all over the map, right? So it's like, hey, I'm starting this nonprofit. And then for, dealing with human trafficking or trying to stop human trafficking. And then that kind of morphed into really a leadership development. So one of the issues where it's like, wow, there's just not enough leaders really know about, this issue and how to deal with it. And so we kind of shifted more towards leadership development. And then that opened up, relationships that led to another thing. And then I ended up getting a job in Washington, D.C. for the largest anti-trafficking slavery organization in the planet. So I was a director for them for 5 years. And then that opened.
How old were you then when you got hired by them?
Early 30s. So probably 30,
I'm gonna
31.
dive back for 2 seconds. This is something it's close to me and it's something I have a lot of interest in. So I didn't know that part of you. So, and I think it's a topic. That's why I love these conversations, because sometimes little things pop up and the conversation goes elsewhere. But was there a moment, what triggered you to get into that? Like what made you aware of human trafficking? Like and how old were you when you first really clicked into that? Because this is something, to be honest, you always heard of abductions, you always heard of stuff like that. But it's been, to me, myself, the last 3 or 4 years. My best man at my wedding, he runs a crime unit. He's a detective in Toronto, Canada, and he's the sergeant for the crime unit. And it's crazy, even somewhere in Toronto, Canada, where it's the amount of gangs that are doing human trafficking right now, and they're not your typical gangs anymore. They're I don't know how it is there, but the gangs here are You got Latinos, you got Orientals, you got Europeans, you got Black. They're all mixed together. There's one gang, and they're very internet based. So a lot of this, like he brings me a lot of attention to is very internet based. How this is happening, and having a 14-year-old daughter, like things like this, or you have to be very alert of these kind of things, right? So let's dive in. Was there one moment, or what clicked in your head to bring more of an understanding or a light to that topic? Because it's such an important topic.
Yeah, I think I heard a sermon at church. Someone kind of mentioned it, and then I started reading some books. You know, my joke is I called up my friend Google and tell me everything you can find. And, that just, I chase ideas. And so it's like, man, I want to know about that. And then that, read a book and then, meet a friend that was doing some stuff, and then, to help. And then, just one thing led to another. And, all of a sudden you find yourself in conversations, and then, it comes up, and you're, reading more about it, learning more about it, trying to figure out, hey, who the organization is doing something about it, which ironically, one of the first organizations I, discovered was the International Justice Mission. Right. And so, that's who I ended up working for. Right. So that largest anti-slavery organization in the world, Gary, incredible leader, founded it. He was the lead investigator for the Rwandan genocide in 94. The UN tapped him. He was working for the State Department and said, hey, go investigate this genocide. And he comes home and was like, wow, there is no one out there trying to protect the poor legally from violence. And so he started this idea of, hey, what if we could put together lawyers and investigators to help protect the poor? And so I read about them, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And they're, rescuing, families from slavery and rescuing girls from brothels, and was like, wow, that'd be unbelievable to, potentially work for them. And so again, I'm starting my little small nonprofit. Then we kind of shift in like, wow, if we could really train more leaders, not just about that, but just help young leaders get better as leaders. So we did that. So then fast forward. So, I was involved with college and campus ministry when I was in university. And so fast forward 8-9 years, and International Justice Mission has an opening for someone to lead their college mobilization team, for like basically oversee all the engagement with university students in the U.S. And they needed someone that could start some new initiatives. So they needed an entrepreneur. Yeah. They needed someone that cared about leadership development and knew how to develop leaders, because they had a lot of young student leaders on these campuses. They had about 150 universities that were engaged, but they needed leadership training. And they needed someone obviously that cared about injustice and being a part of that. And so again, when I'm in my early 20s, I'm like, oh, God, I care about this topic. And it's like, wow, I really care. What do I do? And, I just always tell people, hey, just take the next step. Like, we want to hit a home run every time, right? We want to have the best idea. We want to have the $1 million business, all those things. But sometimes it's just, you got to take the next step, right? And so that's what I was doing in my 20s. And then when I submitted, this, basically filled out this application for this job, and I had some friends at that point that worked there. And so I kind of knew, hey, what they were looking for. But the reality is there weren't many people that had all the steps along the path to actually do that job, And of course, in my 20s, I wasn't thinking, oh, God, if I do this and then that and then that, then that will equip me to be able to have this thing in the future. I wasn't thinking that. I was just thinking, hey, here's a problem. I want to be a part of the solution. And then again, it kind of looks like you're bouncing all over the place, but then you zoom out and you look at it and you're like, wow, there was actually a pretty straight line of how those things worked out. So I did that. So worked there for a number of years and continued just to connect with different leaders of organizations, ministries, and my heart for leadership development just continued to grow. And so then a few years ago, this is where kind of the personal and the professional collided. I was doing some high-end consulting with some leaders at this point, and I started noticing like, wow, leaders are really busy, and most of them are unhealthy. And then what was colliding at the same moment was I looked in the mirror one day and I had a couple thoughts. One was, wow, who ate Greg? I don't recognize this guy. And then, the other thought was, I don't really like kind of what I see. And not just physically, there's a whole, we can go down this trail if you want to, but there was just a lot there of like, wow, I don't really like this. I'm not really satisfied, with kind of who I am and what I'm kind of producing, if you will, from an energy standpoint. And as I'm working with these leaders, I'm seeing just a lot of similarities, and I'm thinking, man, I don't want to end up like I see some of these people. I don't want that to be my journey. I don't want that to be my destination. So my journey drastically changed about 4.5 years ago. I was like, I need to get healthy. If I'm going to be a good, a great husband, a great dad, a great leader and entrepreneur and business, leader, man, I got to be healthy. I don't want to be that guy that, wakes up in his 40s or 50s is like, yeah, I'm done. I just, I can't do it. Don't feel like it.
How old are you right now?
40.
Yeah.
And so, so that really, I look at pictures, time hop pictures and stuff pop up, and I look at that. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I was a completely different person years ago. So now, you kind of take all of those things over really 20 years. And so my focus right now is helping leaders get healthy so that they have the energy to do all that they're called to do, not just in business, but in life. So family, personally, and then, business.
So I'm going to get into all that with the fitness aspect and stuff like that. I just want to finish off with one more thing with the other topic. Was there one story that's clicked that you could remember that clicked in your head when you worked in that company that just this clicked in your head? It was like, wow, like this stuff is real, like the human trafficking and all this stuff. There's just one or two stories that click in your head. I think it'd be great for the audience because I think this is a topic that a lot of people still shy away from because they don't understand the reality of it. So I would love to hear if there's one or two stories that clicked in your head that you remember very vaguely or even very prominently in your mind that really changed how you looked at all that.
Yeah. Well, when I was on staff there at IGM, we heard stories daily, weekly. Yeah. We actually gathered together every day at 11. The whole organization stops work and comes together for 11, what we call 11 o'clock prayer, and just to pray for work in the field. At that point, I think there were 14 field offices around the world, about 600 employees. And so, every day we gathered and people would say, hey, we need you to, this is happening in, Manila, or this is happening in Bangalore, or this is happening in, Dominican Republic or wherever else we were working. And so, we heard stories constantly. But, the two kind of things stand out real quick. One was my very first day when I was there. Again, my wife and I, we'd lived in Georgia and South Carolina, basically our, whole marriage. And we moved to DC, a little out of our element. And my first day, I'm sitting in 11 o'clock prayer, and the office where they are, I could look out the window and I can see the Pentagon, and I can also see the Washington Monument and the Jefferson Memorial. And so that's kind of the backdrop that you see in DC. And I'm sitting in the very back, and someone stands up, hey, would love, to, and they start kind of sharing some details of an ongoing case. So this stuff is never shared publicly until usually months later, until stuff resolves, because these are active investigations, active, criminal, stuff. And basically, like, I'm sitting there, and, I don't really know many people yet. And I'm looking at, again, it's like, oh, I saw the Pentagon on a field trip once. And they start talking about this brothel that, they're investigating. They've tried multiple times to basically, go in and find stuff active, be able to arrest people. But the guy who owns it has paid off like all these, like local officials. And basically he's like this gangster. And it's like, I'm listening to this stuff, and it's like this, I'm looking around like, this is just blowing my mind. This is crazy. And people are just like, yeah, like, man, it's just, it's like, this is just everyday stuff. It's like, wow, it really is just like everyday stuff. It's just, it blew my mind, but it was like, no, this is really how, a lot of it works. So that was my very first day. I always think about that of like, wow, like, don't let that shock wear off, right? It's like, man, remember that, because you do get to a part, and after years of being around it and talking, and I was blessed, and also, sometimes I look back, it's like, man, it was a blessing, but sometimes just I think I might have some emotional kind of scarring from just hearing some of these things. Like I'm not at this point now. I think I expect the worst out of people. Maybe that some of that just, you hear, I mean, hear the most evil things. And so like, I have to really work on, okay, let me look for the good and everything. But man, you just hear terrible stories. And, I got to go to the field 3 or 4 times and actually go visit our field offices and meet with the undercover investigators and meet with those that were, doing this work. And we went out and, a couple of things stand out from the field was, one, we drove through the red light district in one of the areas of I won't say the country, that we were working on, working in, and we were driving, slowly kind of through this area with one of the investigators, and he was kind of pointing out like, hey, that's the place we're investigating, or hey, we did an operation 2 years ago at this place. And you saw a number of older white males walking down the street arm in arm with very young, dark haired, dark skinned, girls from that country. And it was just like, oh my gosh, like you just want to get out of the car and just beat the crap out of someone. And I know that's not probably going to solve anything, but just, oh my gosh, I cannot forget that. And then the other thing I can't forget is, because most slavery is actually not, most slavery is not like sex trafficking and sex slavery. I mean, that's definitely prevalent, but a majority of it is forced labor. And so spent some time in another country where forced labor is, it's massive, millions and millions and millions of people forced into basically working without getting paid. And we went to this brick factory. And so it's just crazy of just how this works of, they make these bricks by hand. And so they enslave entire families to make bricks for 14, 15 hours a day in the 100-degree weather. And I had heard stories from our team about, hey, we did this investigation and we figured out, hey, there was people enslaved in this brick factory. And so, hey, we're going to work with the police. But when the police got there, everyone was gone and the slaves, like the families were hidden. And I used to think, I don't understand. Like, what do you mean? Like, I think, hey, you go to a factory here, you're going to see them running out the back door. Well, man, these facilities, they're massive. They were like 3-4 square miles. It was just crazy. Like we drive on this property and you just this massive complex. And it's like, oh, wow, that makes sense now how they can, hide and escape and just, but we sat there and they, this brick factory that we visited was actually owned by a Christian man. And he is, had been working with our team, just helping. And so we were there, he was there to basically show us, hey, this is, what the actual work is like. This is, what a typical facility would look like. And so we got to make these bricks by hand, and just I actually have my brick back here. That's actually the brick that I made sitting right back here. And so, but I'll never forget just we did that for about 20 minutes with our team of students, and you're all muddy and dirty and smelly. And it's like, man, they're kids as young as 5.
It's crazy, huh?
That are doing that for 15, 16 hours a day. And and so, very, very humbling to be able to be a part of that mission for a number of years and, be a part of sharing just the incredible work that IJM did and still does. Yeah. And so that was a kind of a crazy season.
Would you ever get back into that field at all?
So, we'll continue to support, the work and those that are doing that, love it. But again, my
mission, you have a new purpose.
Well, I feel like my story has been one that has evolved, and I think that for a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of, especially when I was in my 20s, it was a lot of, hey, I knew the types of things I wanted to be doing. Like I loved teaching. I loved, speaking. I loved creating content and writing and those things, but it wasn't so refined. It was just kind of broader things. And so for me, it's been a progression of, the idea of kind of finding your voice. Like, it took almost 20 years, to where those things line up. And now, that's crystallized. The way that we would continue to support something would be, financially, but then helping, again, we talk a lot of, again, my focus is helping leaders get healthy. That's very stressful work. Actually, on my podcast, I interviewed one of the C-level leaders at the A21 campaign, which is another really large anti-trafficking organization, and just talking about, the stress of being around pain and suffering for so long. Like, how does your team deal with that? Really fascinating, kind of conversation around that. Whereas, leadership, leading things is stressful. So it's like, how do we deal with that? But then you add on the emotional, kind of next layer of that type of work, and it just amplifies it. But the principles of how you deal with that are the same. But when it's amplified, like, wow, you've got to be very, intentional about, getting healthy to be able to work in that field, long enough to see the impact you want to see.
3 pillars too, right? This is your physically, mentally, and your spiritually. You have to be at each level at a certain degree that you could be able to control your emotions, right? And like anything, eating comes emotionally. There's other factors that come with it. So give me a regular day for your health.
So
here we go. Dun, da, da, da.
Yeah. So 2 things. One, my day always starts the night before.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I tell people, man, you're planning to have a great day. You want to plan a great week at work. It actually starts the night before, because your energy my energy for today started with the steps I took to get good sleep last night. So I've been obsessed with perfecting as close as I can my sleep over the last number of years. So I've spent an embarrassing amount of money tracking and trying things to improve my sleep, because I figured out, man, when I can get really great quality sleep, my work, my energy, my focus, my attitude the next day is just night and day when I don't. So I typically go to bed at between 9 and 9:30 every night. I don't eat 2 hours before I go to bed. I try to, screens are off an hour before I go to bed. I wear my blue blocking red sunglasses, which my wife makes fun of me for, to try to block all blue light, because that just jacks with my sleep. And it really jacks with most people, so they just don't realize it. I cut my chili pad on about 9 o'clock to as cold as possible. And so this is it's basically you put this thing under your mattress, and it's got these small tubes of water that circulates through, and it can change the temperature. So I like it as cold as possible. So I cut that on about 9. It cools the bed down. Get in bed about 9:30. I'm typically reading a fiction book at night on my Kindle. So that way I can cut the light off and, have it on kind of low mode and read. Then I put my mouth tape on, which is another weird thing I do. So I tape my mouth shut at night, put my eye mask on, because I cannot convince my wife that blackout curtains are stylish. And so she wants it pretty in the bedroom. I want it dark. We can't do that. So I just wear an eye mask. And usually by 9:45, I am out. Wake up. Okay. Typically between 5 and 5:30. I know you want to come back to mouth tape. Most people do.
Well, no, there's a few things. You say, so you call it, I never even heard of that. What do you call it? Chili?
So the name of the company is Chili Pad.
Okay. So chili. Okay. Yeah, chili pad.
Not like you eat,
yes. I was like, okay. And you once you get that temperature, do you sleep on that all night, or you remove it before you go to bed?
Oh no! So it stays under the sheet. So it's on full time. What I love about it too is on their app you can actually change temperature. So your body actually changes temperature when you're sleeping. So one of the reasons you shouldn't exercise late at night and you shouldn't eat late at night is because it messes with your internal temperature,
more of that,
your body temperature. Your body temperature needs to drop for you to fall asleep. Yeah. That's why it's harder. Like you ever been on vacation somewhere where they don't have air, or somewhere, the AC breaks. you're up in Canada, so you don't know if you ever have hot weather up there, but down here it gets hot. I mean, it's already hot
weather up here.
Yeah, when the snow melts in August. But so you want your body temperature to drop, and so that helps do that, right? So that basically it's one hack that helps your body trigger to say, oh, it's actually time for me to sleep. But what's great too is that one of the ways that your body wakes up is that at a certain time, typically is early morning, your body will start releasing cortisol, which then stops your body from releasing melatonin. So your body basically switches, hey, it's time to start waking up, and your body temperature will increase. Well, the chili pad was cool is I go in and I got, so at 5 a.m., it'll start raising the temperature. And so the temperature where I'm sleeping starts raising, and that helps my body temperature increase, which naturally wakes me up. And so you don't get jarred awake by a loud alarm. Your body starts naturally waking up, and you feel more refreshed that way.
So, quick question: when I sleep, I'm learning something here too, which is good. When I sleep, and I focus on that, it's a big component of who I am as well. So when I sleep, I wake up quite a bit. Wake up, flip, turn sides, boom, wake up, turn sides. I probably do that about 4 or 5 times a night. When you're sleeping, do you wake up at all? Or is it boom, we're good, wake up in the morning?
Sometimes I'll wake up and pee. That's that personal. If you cannot drink, again, an hour or so before you go to bed, that will help. My problem is I take a lot of different supplement stacks. Throughout the week. I have different kind of rhythms of that. And so I've yet to figure out how to take those supplements without drinking. And so it's one of those where I've just kind of come to the realization that, hey, I'm just going to have to probably wake up in the middle of the night at least once. But I typically can fall back to sleep pretty easily. Sometimes I can't. I got a lot of sinus issues too. And so I'll wake up sometimes completely clogged, and I have some breathing stuff that I'll do to help kind of clear that out. But sleeping, nose breathing, again, so why the whole mouth tape thing is important. Breathing through your nose, not through your mouth, will drastically help you sleep deeper, and wake up less. And so I would encourage you, it is weird and your wife will make fun of you. I promise. You don't have to do pictures. Or just wait till the light goes off at night and she won't know. And the key is this with mouth tape. When I started it, I was going.
Feel like you're suffocating when you first do it.
So, let me get to it. So, the first couple times I did it, I was going this way, like I'm being abducted. Duct tape all across the mouth, full across. Well, I woke up multiple times, like, oh crap, in the middle of the night, like nightmare. I was like, okay, this is not. So then I was like, well, wait a minute, why can't I just go this way, up and down? And so so I started going up and down, and I was like, oh, that's a little better. And so probably the first week and a half that I started going up and down with the tape, sometimes I would still kind of breathe through my mouth just for the mental aspect of it. It was mental. There was nothing physically like I couldn't breathe, but there was the mental aspect. And so now I've got it where I actually split the tape. So I use basically medical tape.
Yeah.
Get really thin medical tape. So I keep it next to my bed. I tear off a little piece, and I actually split it in half now. So it looks like a little tape dispenser, right? And I just put a little strip. What it does is, so what happens is when you fall asleep, the muscles in your jaw and your mouth, they relax. And so what happens is that your tongue then relaxes, falls back kind of in your throat. And that's why most people snore. And that's where sleep apnea comes, is because they get so relaxed, then their body has to jolt them awake so that they can clear their airways to breathe. Well, by keeping your mouth shut, it forces you to breathe through your nose, and your tongue doesn't roll back like that. Right. And so the only time I snore is if I'm like crazy congested. And my wife would be like, hey, you snored a little bit last night. It's like, yeah, because I woke up and I can feel my nasal passages are just completely blocked. But other than that, you don't snore. Plus, you get much better deep sleep, because breathing through your nose and breathing through your mouth do two completely different things to your nervous system. right? So breathing through your mouth, it's the same thing with exercise, is that when you breathe through your mouth, you're actually letting a whole lot of oxygen, but you're also letting a whole lot more carbon dioxide leave, right? And so you want a good balance of that. But when you breathe through your nose, it actually activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your like the rest and digest, right? So this is what brings calm. This is what activates, your ability to focus. It lowers your heart rate. When you breathe through your mouth, your body thinks, I mean, it's an ancient, I mean, this is like ancestral, kind of DNA. It's, oh crap, I'm trying to go hunt, out of the cave and a mountain lion's coming. And so you start breathing through your mouth really heavy. That activates adrenaline, that activates cortisol, that shuts down, kind of slows down other parts of, your processes in your body so that you can focus on staying alive, right? That's the only thing your body's trying to do at that point. Well, constantly breathing through your mouth basically activates that system on a consistent basis, which cortisol stays higher, means your insulin levels stay higher. You're more likely to have spikes and jumps and, blood sugar spikes, which are going to have energy highs, energy lows, crashes, those things. Again, your basically, inflammation stays higher. Again, all that comes back to the simple practice of 98% of your day, you should be breathing through your nose. When you do that, that impacts, again, your energy, your focus, but especially at sleep, huge deal for sleep. So a little mouth tape, I promise you, try it. You'll wake up.
I'm a heavy dreamer. So I'm going to wake up feeling like somebody's just abducted me. I'm going to be like kicking and screaming. That's it's pretty. What time do you get up every morning? You said 5?
So most of the time between 5 or 6. If I'm traveling, it's a little different. Kind of depends. My wife and I both kind of work out of our home or from a hotel room. So sometimes, we we have to have a fluid schedule. But my best days start with I wake up in the morning. My morning routine, like my habits are going to be drink some water first. Sometimes I'll put a little lemon, a little salt in there. And then lately I've been trying these hydrogen tablets. So I have hydrogen water in the morning, helps, again, lower inflammation. It just helps hydration a little faster. So do that. In my basement, I've built out over the last number of years a pretty nice little home gym. So I go down there. I'll do 10, 15 minutes of mindfulness, meditation. I've got a daily kind of visualization / kind of prayer that I read through. So it's kind of some goals, really kind of a preferred future, and then a little prayer that I pray. And then I do my workout. And so usually 4 to 5 times a week I'm lifting somehow. And then I've got a rower and a bike, and I'll do some cardio usually to kind of finish up. Run upstairs, wake the kids up. Get them going for school. I want to be there for breakfast with them. So I mean, like this morning, I cooked them French toast. So I was cooking while they were chatting, kind of getting their stuff together. Once I knew they were done eating, jumped in the shower, took them to school, came back home by 7:45, and then I try to do my writing in the morning before like meetings and stuff. So I typically try to schedule any type of meeting, podcast. If I'm interviewing someone or being interviewed, I try to do that in the afternoons if at all possible. But sometimes it's like, hey, 10 a.m. All right, well, if that's the only times at work, okay, we'll do it. So I try to get my deep work done in the morning before lunchtime. I typically don't eat lunch. I typically am doing some type of intermittent fast. So do that. Sometimes I'll have like a bulletproof coffee in the morning or fatty coffee in the mornings, and then eat lunch. And then, from there, it just kind of depends on, what's at stake. But really that's, the first kind of 2.5 hours of my day is really like, for my health, my mental health, my emotional health, my relational health with my family, my physical health, working out, and then my, relationship to everyone else. That's when I shower. And then try to get my focused work done. And then the afternoons, it's all over the place. If I'm on site with a client or if I'm, doing coaching calls, I typically do all that stuff in the afternoon.
So with your current business, so you're doing the physical part as well? You're doing the personal training aspect as well with them. So you do in-house like training, stuff like that as well, or is it just more the coaching side of it?
So I have I don't have a certification for, I don't have like a exercise certification at this point. I looked into it. I've got some kind of foundational principles for, hey, here's the things that you should be doing on a consistent basis. Here are the workouts that I do, and I've created workout plans for people, but I'm not sitting there working out. Okay, you need to do 3.5 reps at 75% of your, max for this. I don't get into that level of detail.
But the people you're working with, they're not pro athletes, or, they're trying to move and trying to be healthy. So, getting into those, you would never need, and be honest, most of these trainers, like I graduated college with the fitness leadership program, but most of these trainers, it's a weekend certification. What you've probably learned over the years is probably so much more at a higher level to start with, to be honest, right? So certifications mean absolutely nothing. So that's the reality of it, right? So knowledge and proof of concept is so much more valuable than a piece of paper, right?
Yeah. So the focus, the physical health. So there's 4 realms of health that we focus on. There's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. And so within each of those, there's what we call energy dials. Because again, I'm focused on your overall energy. And so energy, how I define it is, do you have all that you need to do all that you're called to do? Yeah. Right. So energy is not to be confused with charisma, right? So charisma is like, hey, everyone, I'm on stage and I'm wow, and I got lots of, energy. That's charisma. Energy is, again, do you have in the tank what you need to do? So for me, energy is, do I have the relational and emotional capacity to engage with a 10, 9, and 7-year-old in the morning while they're getting ready for school? Do I have the capacity to, juggle that, family responsibilities, job responsibilities? Do I have the focus to sit down and write? I'm currently writing the Stewardship of You book, right? Based upon kind of the principles of what we teach. I'm writing that book. So do I have the focus to work for, an hour to 2 to 3 hours a day, writing and researching, right? Do I have, the decision-making ability to problem solve when I'm coaching and, mentoring entrepreneurs that are high level, very successful, and they've got multiple kind of things going on in their world? Do I have the ability to then see all those moving pieces and help them, craft a plan that's going to help them, right? So for me, energy might be different for, like my wife's a photographer and an entrepreneur as well. So for her, it's there's the creative side. I have to be creative, but she's got to be really creative, right? So energy for her, a big part of that is going to be creativity, right? So looking at, what do you have? So with each of those 4 realms of health, we call these energy dials. These are things you can turn up or down that influence your level of health in that area. And what's really crazy, and this is why I love this so much, especially working with leaders and business owners and entrepreneurs, is that there overlap, right? And so there's a piece of this where I think this is just part of the humanity's fall, is we like to compartmentalize. We like to kind of, hey, this is over here and this is over here, and they're not related, right? It's like, no, my stress at work has nothing to do with my stress at home, and it could be further from the truth. There's so much overlap, right? So physical health, and this was my journey. My emotional health and my mental health was taking a massive hit. A lot of that had to do with my lack of physical health. Yeah. Right. So I was suffering from anxiety. I had just crazy stuff going on in my head. And part of my process of healing was realizing, wow, what I actually put in my body, what I eat, what I don't eat, what I skip, the supplements I take, or the nutrition that I am not getting, has a massive influence on my mental state of mind. It was crazy for me. And that was what really was a big change for me. Was it started with the physical, and then that bled into and really was a domino to find success and health in other areas of life, right? So you've got all these, they overlap, right? And so that's where, with people, that's, when I start coaching someone, it's not, all right, here's your workout plan. It's, where are you at? Let's assess where you're currently at. Where are you trying to go? And then, hey, what makes sense? Because a lot of entrepreneurs, right? They're type A, they're hard charging, goal driven, it's win or bust, that's kind of the deal. Hey, give me the medal. I want to, cross the finish line first. Right. So they're hard charging. Right. And so sometimes it's realizing, hey, doing CrossFit 5 times a week might not be the best thing for your health. Because there's a massive difference, and this, between fitness and health.
100%.
I mean, they're massive. I mean, some of the studies, right, on like long-term triathletes and Ironman athletes and stuff, talking about, wait a minute, these guys can run Ironman, but they have a 7 times greater chance of getting heart disease. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. There's a massive difference between health and fitness, and so. What's your goal? Well, hey, if you want to win a Spartan race, or you want to win an Ironman, okay, well, let's put a plan, but let's make sure that doesn't torpedo the other parts of your life you're trying to win at. And so I know you probably do that too with talking about coaching dads and entrepreneurs. It's, hey, you don't want to just be successful in the business. You also want to be successful at home. But if you're giving 95% of your energy to the business, you're giving your family what I call leftover energy. That's actually one of the things I say to myself every morning. I will not give my family leftover energy.
I love it.
So I want to make sure at the end of the day that I've got enough energy and enough, emotional connection that I won't give them leftovers. Yeah. They're going to get good energy from me. Right. So all those things we can't compartmentalize. And so that's where, again, we look at the overlap of those 4 areas. And then we look at these 8 energy dials and say, okay, what can we turn? Because some of it you might be completely, just missing or totally, just ignoring. Right. So, I mean, like, sleep, maybe that's an afterthought. Well, man, hey, if we can turn this energy dial of sleep, look at the impact it's going to have on your mental, your physical, emotionally. I mean, there's a crazy study on sleep that I read that was talking about basically how layman's terms, they looked at the difference between a person's ability to like read social settings or like social or, interactions. And they looked at basically their ability to do that based upon how much sleep they were getting. And so basically it's like not getting enough sleep. What happens is part of your brain that is able to read like people's facial expressions and really understand what's happening in that, in that moment drastically goes down. And so decision making tanks when you don't get enough sleep, right? That's why you make emotional decisions. And so it's, the joke was like, maybe Michael Scott in The Office was just perpetually tired, right? Because he never could read a situation the right way. I mean, that's what made it funny. But think about us as, entrepreneurs and leaders or coaches or whatever it is that you're doing. Not getting enough sleep actually handicaps your ability to read the room and perform, right? And so if you're giving a presentation or if you are doing a sales pitch, right? If you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to raise, VC, the single best thing you could do the night before is not go over your pitch one more time, is get 8 hours of sleep. Don't go out drinking. Do that after the fact. The night before, man, do whatever you can to get really good sleep. The science is just is too hard to ignore.
Sleep and hydration, so valid. I had a gentleman on, and he's as a guest on our show, and he was my mind just slipped, my head just slipped, but he calls it I think it's called Japanese hydration. Have you heard of that before? He wakes up in the morning, and the first thing he does, room temperature, and don't quote me, I might be wrong on these numbers, but I'm pretty certain these is what he said to me, was you take 1 ounce of water for every 10 pounds of body weight. And you drink it as fast as you can, and you don't touch nothing for 45 minutes. And what that does is fully hydrates you, and then you're good to go for the rest of the day. And obviously you're just topping up throughout the rest of the day. And he's a high level jiu-jitsu guy. He does a lot of martial arts, but he's a very successful businessman. And he says before he started doing that, for example, when he would grapple and do his jiu-jitsu, he'd get off the mat and be dead thirsty. He goes, since he's been doing that, he gets off the mat, he's not as thirsty. So he says his hydration levels have changed drastically. And it's something I was just looking into, but I mean, that's a lot of water you're chugging down in the morning. Yeah. But I think hydration is another thing that I think is such a valid part of what you do. So with your clients how many clients do you take on at once?
It varies. And so, I do some group stuff. So I got a group of entrepreneur restaurant owners that I'm working with. So I do, kind of group thing with them, and then I'll do one-on-one. And then I'll do like organization, assessments. And so come in and work with, executive leadership team or HR department, talk about, hey, cause it's not just about, the leader getting healthy. I mean, that's important. But one of the questions that I'm really posing to organizations now is, if you say that your people are your priority, right? How many times have we seen that that inspirational poster? Our people are our priority. Is your culture of your organization set up so that that's true, right? So, for example, one of the organizations I worked at years ago, I'll never forget. First week I was there, Friday night, get a text message from a VP saying, "Hey, could you work on this thing? Something, I forgot what they needed, but I got an email from a VP on a Friday night. I'm thinking, okay, I feel kind of weird because I'm new here. So it's like, I feel like I need to respond, because it was text message. Hey, I sent you an email. Can you get back to me on that? And I'm thinking, well, gosh, I guess I kind of need to, right? That's a cultural issue, because what you're saying is your time with family, your rest and recovery, your time off so that you can be restored and renewed so that you can be great at your job on Monday. It's not as important as me getting this thing that probably could wait till Monday. That's a cultural thing, right? So I'm working with teams saying, hey, is your people's health, if it's not anywhere on the radar, then your people aren't your priority. Your team's not your priority.
Would you classify that into core values for a business?
I think it could be, for sure.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
And so, little things like, okay, hey, we're going to do, it's not just us. So like, hey, we contact people the weekend. It's, hey, we're doing a brainstorming meeting, and you come in and there's donuts and M&Ms and Snickers and, peanuts and Cokes, to drink. Okay. Well, again, we're just saying, hey, what you put in your body doesn't matter. Well, it does matter. It actually matters to performance. Like, there was a crazy study that I was reading about where, and this is US based, but I'm assuming it would be, across the board, is for every dollar spent on health care for like an employee. So like medical, for medicines and things like that, cost the organization $2.23 worth of basically performance and revenue. So insurance claims, but also the big one is absenteeism. So this is the idea of, a lot of business owners will know what happens in March. Typically, the amount of revenue that's lost because of the NCAA basketball tournament, right? There's those like, hey, there's all this productivity is lost because everyone's watching the games or checking their brackets. That's basically happening year round. We can't put a finger on it because there's not a big event like a basketball tournament. Is that if your people are unhealthy, if they're, there's a whole list of gamut there, of what could cause that, they're not being as productive, So basically I feel like a lot of organizations, they have people show up that they're 70% there.
I would even say less than that. I would even say probably closer to 60, because I mean, we have staff here, so I do see that. So yeah, I agree with that 100%. And it's something as an organization, you just keep the flow going, and it's something that if it's not brought to your attention, you just let it flow. So yeah, I appreciate that. I'm going to ask you two questions. Superpower. If you had a superpower, what would it be?
That's funny. Me and my wife actually had this conversation.
You did?
We've had this before, and I always say that flying would be the coolest superpower. And she's like, no, healing people. And I'm like, that's not really a superpower. That's like Jesus. But, I guess so. I feel bad if I don't say that, but I've always said flying because, most of my life I've lived in big cities.
You see him behind me? It's like, you got Superman back there.
Oh, nice. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, because I've lived in busy cities where there's always traffic. And so it's like, if you could fly, I could hop over all of that. I could skip the Beltway and I could be there, whatever. I think that would just be really cool.
If something were to happen to you today, in a few words, how would you want to be remembered or described by your loved ones?
Caring. Like I want my family to know how much they mean to me. joyful that he cared about things that actually matter. And I find myself thinking many times, like, getting upset because, I didn't get a proposal, didn't get accepted, or, just these things. And it's like, man, at the end of the day, like, I just want to fight for things that really matter.
It is crazy. And I don't know if it's that number, magic number 40, as I'm 44, I realized in the last 2-3 years, and I think we talked about this in your podcast, where those things that would get to me and bother me, I'm letting them start slip away, and I'm not letting them attack me anymore. I'm not letting them control my thought process. I'll intake it. I'll stop it. I'll assess it. I'll intake it, realize it, and then I'll let it go. Because you can't, I realize there's so much more, Greg, is you can't control your past. So why are you going to linger on it? You learn from it and you move on, you move on. Because the minute you stop and you're focused on it, it's just time's going by, and you can't get that time back. So I have that mindset now where it's just, you take it, you intake it, take a deep breath, visualize it, let it in, realize what just happened, reassess, and then go. Or if something triggers me, I'll before I react, I'll try to take a deep breath, assess the situation, don't overreact to it, and then go. And for parenting, for everything, right? I mean, being your partner, your wife, your spouse. I mean, it's just things like that. It just it brings that level of calmness down when you can be able to take control of a situation and just intake it first. Don't react to it. And I think that's the biggest thing.
And I hope it's also just a level of just getting more mature and growing up.
But that's what it is. I think it is. Yeah. It was to me, it was that magic 40. I don't know what it was. It was around that 40s where I started to, you could call it mature. I think that's exactly what it is. Where you start maturing, you start looking and assessing things differently, right?
Yeah. Well, I think too that some of it is, was in your 20s, you're trying to figure out who you are, so you're trying to impress people, with stuff you don't have and stuff you don't know. In your 30s, you're kind of trying to figure out, okay, I know who I am now, but I'm trying to figure out who you are. And then in your 40s, you're like, I don't really care what you think anymore. Like, here's what I'm called to do. Here's who I am. I'm not going to waste my energy now worried about what this person, I wasted a lot of time, a lot of energy in my 20s. Man, I wish that person would recognize me. It's like freaking middle school all over again, It's like, I think now you just realize, I don't care. Sorry, neighbor, my yard doesn't look as good as yours. I don't care. I'm out here podcasting, trying to reach leaders. That's where, if you want to complain, this is where I'm at. Come find me. I just think there's a level of you zone in on
what's important.
Okay, exactly. I feel confident in my calling now. Whereas I think, part of that finding your voice journey is, I just think that's why there's insecurities, because I just not in my 20s, I just wasn't confident. It was like, okay, I kind of like this. I'm drawn to this. I'm interested in that. But there was not a confidence in calling like there is now. And I just think some of that's just, you earned that through time.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I love that. This has been a great conversation. We just hit an hour, and we probably could go on for a bit longer. I appreciate you, brother. I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate what you're doing. Where could our audience find you?
Yeah. GregDarley.com, GregDarley.com. I do free assessments for leaders, so if people are like, hey, I'd love to get my energy up, whatever, man, hit me up. I do conversations. And then, podcast is Stewardship of You. So you just search Stewardship of You. It'll come up wherever. I think it's on 10 different whatever. Most people listen to it on Spotify or on Apple. It's kind of where there's a couple of random ones. You're like, oh, okay, 2% of the audience listens on this. I've never even heard of that. But that's just search that and you can find it. So, hey, man, thanks. I love what you're doing. I love since we've been able to connect and on, again, not just building businesses, but building relationships and things that matter, like leading our families well. And so it's been awesome. Look forward to connecting and collaborating more.
Appreciate it, brother. Thank you so much. That's a wrap for today. I want to thank our guest, Greg Darley, for taking time out of his busy schedule to be a guest on the Jeff Knows Inc. podcast. If you guys enjoyed this episode as much as we have, please tell your friends, tell your family, spread the word, leave a review. 5 stars will be absolutely amazing. Until next week, guys, keep moving forward.